Hi, this is Jeff B. Davis, not the creator of Teen Wolf, and you're listening to Diminishing Returns.
It started as writing, and right from the beginning you knew this was different. Because it was happening in small villages, market towns. And then it wasn't on the TV anymore. It was in the street outside. It was coming through your windows. It was a virus, an infection. By the time they tried to evacuate the cities, it was already too late. The infection was everywhere. The day before the TV and radio stopped broadcasting, there were reports of infection in Paris and New York. I didn't hear anything more after that.
Hello and welcome to Diminishing Returns, part 2 of our zombie, George J. Romero, really, trilogy that we're doing for Octoberween. Ooh, it's not quite Halloween yet.
Yeah, night turns to dawn, doesn't it, Alan?
Oh, yes. Yes, I'm Alan, hello. Over there is Sol.
That was me, just jumping the gun, talking early.
There you go. And joining us again this week, taking a break from filming for his OnlyFans account, it's Calvin Dyson.
Oh my. How do you know about that, Alan? I thought that alias I invented was working well.
Oh yeah, that alias Bond Fan 007.
Hello.
Now, guys, we're in part 2 here. If you haven't listened to part 1 of our Romero trilogy yet, probably should go back and listen to the previous one, where we looked at Night of the Living Dead and lots of other things that tie into that. And then we also watched Diary of the Dead. That's which one it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, these films are largely still seen and thought of as a trilogy, I think. Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead. There were 3 more films made after Day of the Dead 20 years on, and they are not as well regarded. So instead of doing all the good stuff, yeah, exactly, we thought we'd kind of spread it out. And the way we decided to do that was to cover them in chronological order in terms of the story told within the films. Mm-hmm. So last week we did Night of the Living Dead and Diary of the Dead. This week we are doing Survival of the Dead and Dawn of the Dead. And next week we will finish off with Day of the Dead and Land of the Dead. A bit of business up front. Last week Calvin promised that he would watch the Night of the Living Dead remake so we could have a follow-up discustion from Alan.
So that was another version of it from 1990. But like the official kind of Romero-produced one.
Yes. But what is it, Calvin? Billie Eilish released a video for...
Yes.
She released a song, 6 months ago?
Yes.
And they've only just put the music video out now.
Yes.
Why is that?
And so I had to attend to some urgent Bond business and react and film that reaction and put it on YouTube. So I haven't watched that Night of the Living Dead yet, but I will endeavour to do so for next time. I do genuinely want to see it.
But this is great. This is that means that we can do it next episode at the end, and it'll bring the whole thing full circle.
Isn't that nice?
It's a nice bit of through line through these 3 episodes.
Of course.
Yeah, and maybe we'll be ending on a high.
And you know what, guys? If you are gutted because you needed that extra bit of zombie content this week, Dawn and Survival of the Dead is not enough for you, and the Dawn of the Dead remake, which we will also be talking about. We have just put up a Diminisode reviewing Train to Busan sequel, Peninsula. I got early screen access to it via my industry connections. So I've seen Peninsula, and we did a little review of it on our Patreon, patreon.com/dimreturns. For that Diminisode and many others.
Many others.
And they're not all about zombies, but that one is. So if you're sick of us talking about zombies as well, head over there, because, we're also talking about, like, Bill and Ted.
Yes.
That's not got any zombies in it.
Bill and Ted, yeah.
Anyway, on to business. So the focus this week is Dawn of the Dead, but before we get to Dawns of the Dead, because we are, of course, going to talk about the remake and probably more than one cut of the original film as well. Let's look at Survival of the Dead, which is the next film, chronologically speaking, in terms of the narrative.
So how do you figure that?
Night of the Living Dead is the initial outbreak as it takes place. Diary of the Dead is officially set concurrently with Night of the Living Dead. Survival of the Dead clearly takes place immediately after Diary of the Dead, or arguably partway through it.
Because there's a character that connects them.
Yeah, in odd fashion for a franchise that has made 5 unconnected films. The sixth and final entry picks up with a character scene in one scene and kind of spins off into a new adventure following them. So yeah, I mean, Survival of the Dead is a weird one. It's George A. Romero's final film as a director, although he does have a film he made in the 70s, which I think is still yet to actually be released, but there's talk of it being remastered and what have you, and made available at some point. So, I mean, it's basically his last film. It's certainly his last film in the Of the Dead series. It's generally regarded as a damp squib, worst in the franchise entry.
And this came after Diary of the Dead, so that's saying something.
If you want more detail on what could have been, do check out How Didn't This Get Made, my little side podcast project at the minute. Episode Delay of the Dead is out now and covers all of the George A. Romero zombie sequels and spin-offs that never got made.
It's a good title.
Thank you. Diary of the Dead. And it was called Development Hell at one point, but I've changed the name of the podcast just in case you somehow missed last week.
There's very good technical reasons for that.
Yeah, Diary of the Dead. Originally, at one point, the plan was to just do a sequel picking up at the very immediate ending of that film with some of the characters who survives? 2 of them survive going into a bunker, is that right?
The teacher lives.
3, the teacher.
3 of them, sorry, yeah. So 3 characters from Diary of the Dead survive, lock themselves in a sort of safe room in this mansion as all the zombies wander in, and it's quite a bleak, how are they going to get out of this ending? And the plan was to do a direct sequel, but that obviously never came to be, and instead George A. Romero honed in on the actor who plays like a SWAT team member, just like a soldier.
Yeah.
National Guard, I think there's...
National Guard, that's it. Who rob the characters in Diary of the Dead at gunpoint after running into them on the road. He must have liked this actor, that's all I can... assume, because there's nothing about that character in either film, to be honest, to make you think, yeah, that's the guy we need to follow on the next film. There's a little bit at the start of the film with him doing a bit of voiceover about how he was in this documentary on the internet, and that's kind of all it has to do with Diary of the Dead. There's a couple of references to the internet early on, because they see a video posted online that leads them to this island. Other than that, it's kind of its own thing entirely. And I think this film, I think one of the reasons that it's dismissed is that it is
crap.
Not a big... Well, yeah, I mean... As I was saying that, I was like, oh, Alan's going to swoop in and say crap. And then he did. But I think it's often dismissed by, big zombie genre fans because they wanted something big and proper... ending as such, and instead it really is just like a little footnote in the franchise, like a little epilogue. But I feel like with Land of the Dead, George Romero had kind of, if he hadn't kind of done everything he could with it, felt like he'd done everything he could with it and was just playing around, having fun, making lesser B-movies there.
See, I get that from Diary of the Dead, because I understand, maybe coming off Land of the Dead, which he had a big budget for, and a lot of studio interference, I'm assuming, and that kind of thing. I understand, for a guy like him especially, he just kind of wants to step back, do something a bit quirky, a bit different, he wants to do his handheld thing, and that felt like an excuse enough for me.
Yeah, you are right. Diary of the Dead was a conscious choice to step back from making a big budget film, because George preferred making little low budget films where he called all the shots. That I think he was made offers to make a big budget Land of the Dead 2 kind of film, and he ultimately decided against it. So yeah, I think you're right.
But Diary still has that whole found footage handheld concept that I'm like, okay, I can see why as a filmmaker, if you want to experiment and do something a bit different, you would maybe do that. Survival of the Dead, I've no idea what the pull is here. It's like 2 bickering Irish families. And is it set in Ireland? It's not in Ireland, is it?
No, it's a little. It's set on an island. It's a little island off the coast of Delaware. Is that right? Do they say that?
It's described as a little island, but there is a very expansive kind of wide shot where you can't even see the end of the horizon. And also, there's massive rolling plains, there's forests. It's a pretty significant island, I think, to say there's 2 families living there.
I thought it must have been like part of Canada or Los Angeles doubling as Ireland. There must be a line in there somewhere.
It's bound to be Canada, isn't it?
I believe it's Canada, yeah. George A. Romero is known for, being from Pittsburgh and loving Pittsburgh and making all his movies in Pittsburgh up until a point in his career. And somewhere along the line, he decided he liked Canada, and that became his new hub that he worked from most of the time.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, look, I'm just going to come out and say it. I think this is one of the most egregious examples of my opinions that you're ever going to come across on this show. I think statistically the most out of whack with me liking something more than everyone else on IMDb. I think this is only topped perhaps by Home Alone 5.
Oh, goodness.
Which Alan and I both felt was actually a solid entry in the Home Alone franchise.
Much better than it should have been.
I don't hate Survival of the Dead. I think it works for what it is. I think if, like me, you spend a lot of time watching lots of zombie movies and therefore watching lots of terrible, low-budget, shitty zombie movies, to see something as competently put together as this is quite a welcome relief.
Oh, yeah. I don't doubt there are some that I would enjoy less, but that doesn't excuse this one, which is...
Most zombie films are terrible. But yeah, I don't hate this film. And I'll tell you why. I think, unlike Diary of the Dead, I think the tone is a lot more knowingly playful here. There are far more moments of obvious attempts at comedy and silly little gags. And I think that kind of makes the whole Western thing it's doing work for me, because the premise is absurd. But
Western?
Yeah, he's going for a kind of Western pastiche, isn't he? These 2 feuding families out horseback riding, gunslingers.
Oh. But it's Irish people.
Yeah, but you got a lot of Irish people in your old westerns, because
one of those Irish westerns off the coast of Delaware.
You got Irish people in westerns because they were first generation immigrants. It was quite a common thing to have your Irish characters in your...
Oh, there, young Marty McFly's come to visit us.
Exactly. And the main old man, the kind of one that I suppose is set up as more of a hero than the other one, less of a bastard than the other one. I think he is actually giving a very fun, playful performance I can get on board with.
That's like Malcolm McDowell in Home Alone 5.
Yes, exactly. But we complained about a lack of actors being able to pull stuff off to that level in Diary of the Dead. I think this guy is working at a level where it's like, okay, he's got this kind of camp B-movie nonsense charm about him.
I'll agree with you there, yeah.
And that does a lot to pull me through it. Like I say, all those things there, Western pastiche, crazy old Irish man, and a sense of fun with what it's doing.
Well, I didn't have any fun watching it, I'll tell you that much.
Okay.
Your leading man, he's a nice kind of... He's the hero, but he's a bit of a bad boy sometimes. But, when it really comes down to it, he'll save you. That kind of character. Pretty stock, but he does it well. I think he's a solid...
I was going to say, we touched on this last week, but it's absolutely true. And it's true of every George A. Romero movie. He works with stock characters, and he does very little to flesh them out beyond their sort of 2 or 3 personality traits that he gives them. I mean, one thing I will say, I think the biggest issue with this film is that it's the only George A. Romero movie that isn't clearly about something. All the other films are quite blatant in what they're trying to do, be that as simplistic as Dawn of the Dead's about consumerism. That's something we'll discuss later. Is it actually? I don't know. All the other films are quite clearly commenting on society in a specific way. Diary of the Dead last week was whether or not it worked. It was, exploring our relationship with the internet. And this film, I don't feel like it's even trying to make any specific comment. It just seems to be a broad, sweeping thing about conflict. It's very easy to read it as a pro-life, pro-choice debate film, but I don't think that's intended.
In as much as any of the messages he's putting across get across, I suppose. It's messy.
Of course, if anyone if anyone listening hasn't seen it, it's the main conflict is there's these two feuding Irish families. Well, they're not Irish; they're American families, but they have Irish accents.
Yes, the O'Flyns and the Muldoons, like
yeah. But the idea is that I think they are just so removed from the mainland that they haven't evolved with the times, and they're still living in the olden days. Essentially, that's the concept. As stupid as it is, they get into a new feud when the zombies turn up because one of the families takes the opinion of, let's keep all the zombies alive. Well, not alive, but, chained up in a room somewhere so we can try and find a cure, or, they might turn back. We don't know. The other family take the opinion of, they're zombies, they're dead. Let's kill them all now, get rid of them because they're dangerous and they're going to kill more people and make more zombies.
Which is a fair argument.
Yes.
It is a very fair argument, yeah.
Well, the problem is, though, the guy who wants to keep them alive kills a lot of them, quite a considerable amount of them. And then it doesn't seem to be like he has any ethical kind of position. It's just like he's trying to annoy the other bloke.
Yeah.
That works perfectly as a pro-life, pro-choice debate.
This is my problem. I just gave up on the story, trying to understand what was really going on, all of this kind of stuff. I was finding it very boring, or it was going over my head, or anything like that. So I'm looking at this as just a sequence of set pieces that hopefully are either going to maybe not even scare me, but creep me out a bit, or I can appreciate the horror filmmaking, or something that is going to amuse me, something like that. And I don't even get that. It's like all of the zombie scenes are really, I think the staging is very dull for a start, and it's just, it's very lethargic. I'm amazed that this can even be considered a horror film, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's particularly trying to be scary, this one. To be honest, I think that's true of a lot of George Romero's zombie movies. I think very few of them are really supposed to be scary, but we'll talk about that a bit more. I think it's meant to be a kind of pulpy adventure story. Another
thing in this film that I didn't quite get was that they were trying to get the zombies to eat animals instead of trying to eat humans all the time.
Yeah.
But I didn't really understand the value of that particularly. Like, why that was such a big thing that they were trying to do.
Well, I think the idea is if you can fill them up on animal meat, then they might become docile and you can keep them around as just, they might not eat people. I'm not a huge fan of that subplot myself. It seems a bit of a stretch that the characters would take that much interest in that. To be honest, I think it's George A. Romero attempting to explore some new aspect of the zombie rules in this film that he hasn't done in his other films, and it would make sense if it came in a film set years after the apocalypse and not weeks. But to be honest, I think this film being set where it is in the chronology is a mistake. I think it would work better if it was set concurrently with the likes of Day of the Dead later on. Yeah, I mean, look, I know I'm not going to win you over to anything with this, and fair points, it's not for everyone, so do you want to spend any more time on it?
I guess not. No.
Review and move on to Dawn of the Dead, which is what everyone's here for.
Yeah, I've kind of said all I have to say about it, really. It's it didn't work for me on any level. It's a 2 out of 10 from me. I think I gave Diary 3, and this was worse. Nothing much for me here. I kind of like the last shot with the...
Yeah, I love that shot, yeah. I love that the film's willing to embrace that bizarre degree of poetry over realism. That if, for anyone who hasn't seen it, the final shot is the two feuding heads of these families, now zombies, with their guns out because, George Romero loves the idea that zombies retain base instincts and memories. And again, this is something that I think would make this film work better if it was set years after the outbreak rather than the immediate aftermath, because there's a lot of zombies retaining memories and going through their motions from when they were alive in this film. And that feels like something that would develop as the zombies have been around for a while. But anyway, the final shot is the two picking up their guns and walking out onto a horizon in silhouette at night to shoot each other with these guns, like an old shootout in a western, and the moon is about 7 times bigger than it should be in the sky.
I thought it worked, and I thought like the voiceover was quite like I don't know if that theme was properly explored, but I just liked the idea that the two would be so like even in death they don't give up their feud. I thought that was quite funny. So it's above a 1 out of 10 for that. That's all I have to say about it.
Well, do I prefer this to the last one? I think it's probably an easier watch. I think that's basically what you're getting at, Saul. I think it's just an easier thing to watch. But at least the other one was trying to do something, if it not doing it well. I don't know. This one's a better film, I think. However, I still only gave it a 3 out of 10.
I mean, I'm going the opposite direction, so I suppose it's fine if you want to be harsh, because I'm being unreasonable. I find this very easy to watch, and like I say, as a zombie fan, it does it for me. I don't particularly love it. I think it is very flawed, but I can enjoy it, and I certainly get more out of this one than Diary of the Dead. So I'm giving this a low but definite 7 out of 10. As I say, I think that might well be my most egregious example ever of me liking something more than the general public. The only other ones are Home Alone 5, as we mentioned, and I really like Bruno a lot more than the IMDb score as well, the Sacha Baron Cohen film. I think those are all the surprises you're going to uncover from me.
I'm glad that you organised these films in this way. I'm glad that we're not ending on Survival of the Dead. I think that'd be a bit of a downer to kind of cover the main 3 in the trilogy, and then it'd sort of maybe peter out. But
I think it's a lot nicer to watch them in this order as well, going through for the rewatch, because it does always feel like you kind of end on a bum note and watch a person's career kind of dwindle down if you marathon these films at all. And it's been nice getting the 2 weaker ones out of the way early on and then hopping on to Dawn.
Well, you say that as if this is going to be a great film, so let's address that immediately.
Oh.
Yeah, all right. Here comes Alan. All right. Alan to rain on everyone's parade.
What cuts did we all watch of this? I'd like to get that out of the way. I watched the theatrical cut.
It was whatever I watched was half an hour too long.
I think you probably watched the US theatrical cut, Alan.
Right.
That's the default version of the film. That's the only version I had seen prior to prepping for this podcast. You want a quick history of cuts, because this is, like Blade Runner and several other films, this is a particularly notorious example of a film where there are different edits floating around and so on. But basically, there was a really long cut, which is often attributed as the director's cut, but it isn't the preferred cut from George A. Romero. It was like a working cut, which I think was shown at the Cannes Film Festival and then restored later for some sort of DVD release or Laserdisc or what have you. So that's not a cut I've seen or particularly care to see. George A. Romero wasn't a fan himself, apparently. Then there is the US theatrical cut. This is George Romero's cut, his preferred version. That's the one almost everyone has seen. The other big famous cut is the Dario Argento cut. Dario Argento, horror legend in his own right, helped finance this film, and the deal he struck with George Romero was that George would have the final cut over English language territories. So he would put together his own version of Dawn of the Dead for America, Canada, the UK. Dario Argento would get final say over the edit for the rest of Europe. He himself, doing... Well, he's a big horror guy in Europe, in Italy. So he cut a film to match what he saw to be a kind of European taste and match his sensibilities. So his version is about 20 minutes shorter, and it is far more action heavy with no real character development, different music. There is also a kind of ultimate cut knocking around, which is just one of these things where a company has tried to assemble every bit of footage of the film together from all the cuts into one cut. But I don't think there's any sort of official or at least creator involvement in that project. And then, there's things like TV cuts and Japanese TV cuts, but they're just weird little novelties. So yeah, I imagine we've all seen the US theatrical cut, the George Romero one.
This explains why there's that 7-disc box set coming out soon that I saw. It's like £70 or something. Can I just say,
I know, yeah.
Yeah. Now,
right, come on, Alan.
Let me
Here you come
put
to
my
piss
cards
on everyone's
the table.
strawberries.
Let me punch my cards through the table in anger.
Beloved horror classic, Dawn of the Dead.
This, I think, it was the most infuriating film I've ever seen. It angered me so much. The characters, just everything they do is stupid, and they all deserve to die. And I wanted them all to die.
No, it's not. I think they're pretty savvy characters who make a lot of smart decisions, actually.
I felt like they were very real, and the silly decisions that they made felt real to me, as like someone in that situation might well end up going a bit nuts and doing some of the things that they do. It felt real to me in that respect.
Come on, Alan. Let's go through it then. What are the decisions should we go through the plot and you can highlight as
well? Let's just go through it. I'm sure I'll tell you when I'm annoyed about things. But I do like the four principal characters that we have, and it reminded me of Night of the Living Dead in that sense that it's very kind of character driven. They're having to deal with each other, and it's all very downplayed. These kind of the same kind of acting style. I did like that. Just the plot of it and what they do just fucking annoyed me.
So the film starts in a newsroom, and I love this. I used to quite dislike the opening of this film when I was younger because it felt a bit slow to get into the action, but I don't know, I love watching the kind of chaos in the newsroom, a 1970s newsroom, which is probably quite a chaotic environment to begin with, as the world is kind of crumbling around. I love everything at the start of this film.
Yeah, no, I thought it was really pacey, actually. It didn't feel slow to me at all. I thought this newsroom thing was a really good way to get into the action quick and also get some exposition out of the way.
There's no zombie carnage initially off the bat, so it's slow in that sense, but it's very, quick in terms of things are happening and people are doing stuff.
No, it's gripping, and I liked that you're sort of seeing people going about their jobs, but it's also kind of cracking up. It's coming apart at the seams as well, because people are sort of slowly realizing, oh no, the status quo is not gonna survive this. Actually, we're gonna have to do something, which I quite like.
And I've said for at least 10 years now that I would love them to make a zombie movie that is just set in the newsroom, like that. We follow the news team as the news starts to come in and they end up having to defend themselves. And some films have gone into similar territory. I think there is actually a film that's done it called Dead Air, which is like a radio newsroom, but I'd like to see it done well.
I love the hints that later on we get in the film where they're watching TV and it's like there's a talking head on the TV, and then later on in the film they revisit him and he's just like, the set behind him is just like not organised. It's him and the other guy just shouting. It's like just completely, you do get the sense that they were just trapped in the room with the camera and the broadcast stuff.
What are you saying? I mean, you scientists. Dummies! You're suggesting... Dummies! Dummies! Excuse me. Listen, quiet. Shh.
One wonders whether it's worth saving. It's worth saving. For all I know, the brains are already dead, and it's the idiots that are still alive.
I used to find those bits quite slow and annoying when I was younger, but again, watching it now, it's like, no, this is great. There's some great stuff in the sound mix. You can hear people like off camera shouting things at them. And it sounds very real. And it's this very, like, I think it feels really real. It's like a very realistic debate with this guy being like, look, it's not about Democrats, it's not about Republicans and blah, blah, blah. And all these people, like, booing and jeering off at the side. And the interviewer trying to keep the thing together. And I love it. I love it. The fact that the guy's got an eye patch on is a bit of a weird distraction, but... hey, that's George Romero for you. I'm sure there was some reason behind it.
Well, it's obviously George Romero had seen Nashville. He thinks, oh, I'll do a bit of that. That looks good. The kind of Altman-esque soundscape of the newsroom. It just it needed to get somewhere quicker. It was just annoying. Unfocused is the word I used, actually.
But I think that's by design.
I think it's by design as well.
Pure unfocused chaos.
Yeah, I didn't like it.
But there is a focus in that we're focusing in on. I mean, she's set up as our protagonist initially, Francine. So we're focusing in on her running around seeing this all unfolding, and she's got a kind of subplot going on. Well, it's the main plot of the film, but she's gonna go up to the roof and get on this helicopter, which is gonna make a run for it. And then, the newscopter's going rogue because everything's falling apart and it's everyone for themselves. I think that's a really nice little way of doing it. It's not the focus of the film up front. It's just there's chaos in the newsroom. She works in a newsroom, or there's a little coup taking place that we're going to hone in on and go off with as a little tangent. I love it. I think it's a great opening to a film. I think it's very real.
And it continues into the next sequence as well, which is in a sort of block of flats. I guess it's sort of like how do you call it in America? It's like council flats here, I guess is what you
like a high rise.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and you have this police team, sort of like SWAT team, who have descended on this place, and they're trying to sort of restore order because there's been an outbreak in this thing, and they're sort of like bursting into rooms and stuff. But again, just that, like, I really like both of these sort of vignettes at the start, where it's like you see people going about their daily business, and then it's kind of slowly dawning on them, like, oh no, this isn't like I don't clock off and go home, and this is something else. And I love it. There's one of the guys, like, after the horrors that he's seen, he like shoots himself. He can't take it. I think it's fantastic.
For me personally, this sequence is my least favorite part of the film.
Oh, I love it.
I do like it, don't get me wrong, but I don't know, it's always stuck out to me. I think this bit is, I don't know, maybe just a tad too long, this bit. I don't know. For me, it just feels like they felt, right, we've done the news bit, now we need to throw some zombie action in. But it's kind of weak 1970s zombie action. So I guess the way it's, like, again, I don't think this is a particularly scary film. And I think this opening sequence is the only point where the film is trying to scare you. And I don't think it really works. But I do like it. I think there's some great moments here.
I do agree with you to an extent. It's like, I don't find the zombies themselves scary. It is more just the, I guess just society as we know it sort of collapsing, and it just dawning upon these people while they're in these situations. That's what I find the scary part about this, because you don't get that later on in the film, because it's just kind of established that things have broken down and they're having to adapt and whatnot. Whereas here it's that initial carnage that is, and maybe it's just because that's slightly more relatable to what we have experienced this year. If you've gone to the supermarket in, end of March, early April, it's quite a strange sight to go in and see just entire massive supermarkets completely empty, and you kind of wonder, like, oh god, how is society going to hold up? But yeah,
as I say, I don't find the film scary, but not only do I not think it's supposed to be, I mean, there's a feature-length documentary about Dawn of the Dead on the DVD called The Dead Walk, and I can't remember if it's in that or the commentary specifically, but George A. Romero is on record as saying he didn't even view Dawn of the Dead as a horror film when he was making it. He said his intention was it was always supposed to be like a comic book, in that it's just kind of pulpy action with a bit of gore and a bit of comedy and a bit of, thrills and chills, but not necessarily horror.
Right, yeah.
And I think that is how this film plays. I think it plays like a fun adventure with a real dark streak, and there are disturbing thoughts that are dropped in there, but it's not out and out terrifying.
Yeah.
So yeah, it works for me on that level. I don't know about you.
It hadn't even occurred to me that it might be supposed to be scary. I hadn't thought of that at all. And I didn't think that of Night of the Living Dead, to be honest, really. I didn't find it scary.
See, really, I think Night of the Living Dead is a really chilling film, and it's full of proper horror.
You like existential dread, though, don't you? That's your thing.
Yeah,
I just think that doesn't touch me.
What kind of horror does get under your skin, then? What does scare you, Alec?
Ghosts.
Oh yeah, you find the Sixth Sense scary, don't you? You fucking... I mean, the whole opening. Basically, once they got to the mall, I was like, oh, right, okay. The film has started now. That's about 37 minutes in or something ridiculous. It's just this whole opening bit should be done in 5 minutes. You set up the characters, you push them together somehow, and then that's it. I don't care about any of this. The mall's Act 2.
Maybe that's the problem.
you've got a beginning, middle, and end. That's the middle. It's not.
But the beginning doesn't tell me anything. The beginning isn't giving me anything.
Well, it is if you haven't seen 500 zombie films. That if you're watching this film in 1978, chances are you've maybe seen Night of the Living Dead. Maybe if you're really into your horror films, you've seen a few of the crappy Italian zombie movies that have come out since. But chances are you've not really seen any zombie movies before. There's a good chance you've never even seen Night of the Living Dead, and this is the first time you've settled into it. I mean, there is very notably, before they get to the mall, there's a sequence when they... Because our character, the news copter pilot, Francine, who's a news reporter or researcher or something in the newsroom, they both hop in a helicopter, meet up with their mate who's in a SWAT team. He's befriended some other guy in the SWAT team. They all hop in a helicopter and fly away, and we fly over a load of rednecks on the way to the mall who are just out having a kind of cookout and having fun shooting zombies. And it's clearly picking up the ending of Night of the Living Dead, where we saw these roving bands of people assembling, posses of people with guns taking out the zombies. Yeah, look, this is still going on, but that isn't the end of things saved. It's still like society's still falling apart in spite of this. I mean, that's George A. Romero's hippie beatnik side coming out again.
Oh yeah,
and I think if there's one consistent through line in the subtext of these films, it is revolution. Because this is a man who obviously came of age during the 1960s, cultural revolution. And I think that ultimately, when you drill it down, I think that is what these films are about.
Sticking it to the man.
Yeah, but, and I think there's a real, just how the film's put together, that montage showing all the shooting and having fun, I think that's cut together like real old school 1970s Hollywood. That to me evoked all these classic bits of very well regarded kind of arty cinema. It's really like just a little like a collage of things just to wash over you for a few minutes. It doesn't feel like a montage in the modern sense, but I love it. It's just like, we're going to drop in on this for 3 minutes and move on, and I think it works really well, personally. But Alan obviously doesn't. Because Alan was desperate to get to the mall. Alan was like a little spoilt brat on Saturday morning who wants to go buy the new copy of whatever video game's just come out. Like, Mom! Getting mad at his mum who stops to have her hair done on the way. Alan's there kicking the seat, yelling at her.
Okay. So my other major problem with these opening scenes were that we establish our principal characters here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But what do we establish? The idea is that the little one of the police guys, he's friends with the newscopter guy, but then when they all get together, it's as if they've never met before. They never speak to each other. The little one and the big one are really friendly with each other, but we've seen them only just meet, albeit in the kind of heat of battle, and they've bonded as warriors. But that didn't make any sense. Like, why establish these characters if you're not going to stick to it in the second act?
I mean, I've got friends who I'm not that close with, but
are they the one you would say, hey, I've got a helicopter with one space on it, do you want it?
Yeah, if they were like professional SWAT team members with guns and knowing how to use them, I might go, oh, my mate's got like SWAT team training and a load of guns. He'd be good to bring along, wouldn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, I did just take it as people are just like panicking and just like taking the first sort of like, oh yeah, you've got a helicopter, yep, I'm coming, that's fine.
If that's how it was presented, that would be fine. This is how you set this thing up in 5 minutes. You do a bit of news stuff to establish these two characters. The police are coming in, they're trying to sort something out. They run off to the helicopter on the roof. These two cops who are friends, they're partners, whatever, they work together. They burst through. We've seen them already kill some zombies. They burst up to the roof. They're like, where the fuck are you going? I go, we've got a helicopter, we're just going to get out of here. And they go, fuck, this might be our only chance. We're going with you. And then they fly off.
No, I don't know. I don't like that. I've seen that. I like this vague, look, we're kind of loose friends. We've got a little plan in the apocalypse together. It's not very well thought through, but nothing is. It's all kind of winging it. It's the 70s. They probably never spoken to each other sober before. They probably met at a key party. Everyone was off their tits. and now they're actually having to get to know each other properly.
Well, they don't attempt to get to know each other at any point.
Yeah, because they're men. Men don't do that, Alan.
Okay, here's another thing.
They just exchange stern looks and shoot zombies, and that's how they bond, over shooting zombies.
Well, you know how we talked about the poor representation of women in Night of the Living Dead?
Yeah, before you get into what you're obviously about to say, I think this film has fantastic, or a fantastic character in Francine. I think she's a really great, well fleshed out character. So what's your problem with her?
She's a fucking irritating character is what she is. As are they all.
Well, yeah. So this Alan, who's a big fan of Barbara in Night of the Living Dead because she's a whimpering woman who just shuts up and sits in the corner and gets out of the way and lets the men do their business, having men discussions. Alan doesn't like Francine because she actually speaks up and tells the guys that they're being idiots and gets involved in the planning and what have you.
Is that what you think she's doing?
Yeah, she's as involved in the planning as any of them are. I mean, Ken Faree, Peter takes charge a lot of the time.
Yeah.
I should say she's not like a total badass character. I think she's a very well-drawn, realistic character.
Yes, I completely agree.
And I think that she does have a lot of strength about her. I think she does go toe-to-toe with the men.
And it is established that she's pregnant very soon after this, really. And so that does kind of excuse why the character isn't sort of running around the mall with the rest of them. I think it's a shame that it does isolate her from a lot of the action later on. And, I don't need her to pick up a gun and, be toe-to-toe with the guys. Like, if you're after that kind of representation, then this isn't the movie for that. But for what she is, I think she's very well written. I like her a lot. Her and Ken Foree are my two favourites. And yeah, I think she works very nicely.
To be honest, I think she's the best written character in the film, honestly. I think she's got the most depth and characterization. And to be honest, I think all the characters in this film, by the standards of George A. Romero, are very well realized. This isn't going to win any awards on its drama, but as characters in the middle of a zombie film, I think they're great.
No, I think as the characters, it really reminded me of Night of the Living Dead. Very similar style. It felt like kind of actors devising stuff and making characters rather than just working to a script and working to characters they've been told to play. I don't know exactly how it was in the production, but that's what it felt like. And when we had moments of them interacting, of them, the psychology of the situation, I quite liked it, as I did with Night of the Living Dead. But unlike Night of the Living Dead, this is littered with other bullshit that really annoyed me. Most of that, I think this is what it comes down to, right? These zombie attacks take 20 minutes because they lumber towards you slowly, which can be a threat on its own that you could make work, but it's just like, fucking walk away. When you go in there, shut the door. Stop fucking doing stupid things and getting killed. You deserve to die, and I don't care about the characters.
See, last time Sol mentioned about how, the slow zombie, one alone is not a problem, but if you have a group of them and you make bad decisions, then you are going to, and I like that this film explores that with we've been calling him the little guy, I thought he looked like Brad Bird, the other SWAT guy. So I just kept thinking, doesn't he?
I think you must have said that to me at uni, because I've always had that thought in my head.
Yeah, because I just call him Brad Bird now. But later on in the film, we see him sort of take it for granted, I think, a bit. And we see
he gets
we
careless,
see him make and we see him make bad decisions, and then that has an effect. And I excuse it early on in the film because I just take it as like, well, they don't really know what they're doing yet. It's not second nature to them just yet. I like the scene with the two children zombies and Ken Foree. I think he plays that really well. Like, they're not a physical threat, and he's, just a bit confused by it.
It's hard to shoot kids.
Would you kill a child? That was the big question in horror in the 70s.
And then there's this bit where this one zombie comes out, and he's got this, like, Frankenstein monster head.
Yes.
And I'm
what
like...
What a weirdly large forehead this man has.
I was like, I suppose that's some kind of homage to, Frankenstein's monster being an early zombie in cinema or whatever. And then, of course, he gets too close to a helicopter blade, and it, like, takes off the top of his head. And I was like, oh, that's why that was there.
Yeah. I love that scene. He has got a silly head that looks dumb, but, You've got to go with the effects in this film if you're going to watch it. And I think that's such a great little moment, because that teaches that character to be a bit more careful. But it's a nice little sight gag. Do you know why that sequence exists? I assume you probably don't.
No.
As written, the film originally ended on a depressing note or a more depressing note, where our two final survivors, Francine and Peter, would run up to the rooftop, and in the film as it stands, Peter basically says, "Go on without me, I don't want to live anymore, I'm just going to stay here." Mm-hmm. Like, he basically says, "I'm going to kill myself," and he's about to commit suicide, and then he doesn't. At the last minute, he changes his mind and fights the zombies off and runs to the helicopter. In the script as written, he just kills himself there. And Francine runs up to the helicopter and looks at everything happening, and at the last minute decides there's nothing worth living for and just thrusts her head into the helicopter rotor blades to kill herself.
Oh, Jesus.
And the final shot of the film was going to have the credits rolling over it. It was just going to be all the zombies huddling over her body, like eating her, like headless corpse, with the rotor blades running, and the rotor blades were gonna stop running at the end of the credits, implying that they wouldn't have got very far with the amount of fuel they had anyway, because it was only enough to kind of fly for 2 or 3 minutes. And that was the original ending as intended. Somewhere during production, George Romero was like, "You know what? We've been through so much with these characters at this point. Let's give them a chance. Let's let them live." Which is why we get the more upbeat ending, where they actually do get in the helicopter and fly off into an unknown future. But at that point, they had prepped a whole head rigging special effect. So they were like, let's just chuck it on a zombie and do it at the start.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So Francine's head would have just suddenly expanded.
Yeah, would she have had that fake head on the whole way through the film so it didn't look odd right at the end?
You know what, actually, now that I think about it, it might well be...
They did a makeup test and thought, this is shit, we can't do it.
No, I think I might actually be confusing it with that moment at the start of the film when the SWAT team explode that person's head. You know that?
Oh, yeah.
You know, when they shoot that guy and the head just explodes?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I might be confusing it with that moment special effect, actually, and I think the helicopter zombie was there to set up the foreshadowing that the rotor blades can be used to kill you. I think that's what I'm thinking of. But anyway, so they stop to refuel. I like this bit. There's the bit with the... Like you say, Alan's complaining that they're stupid with the zombies and they shouldn't be harmed, but none of them are harmed at the start of the film. The only issue with those kid zombies is that they're inexplicably fast, because George Romero couldn't direct these kids to be slow like zombies. They didn't get it, and I guess he just didn't want to shout at them or whatever to get them to redo it, so they run at him.
It works.
Anyway, I think there's some really great... We spoke about the cinematography in Night of the Living Dead, and again, I always thought of Dawn of the Dead being quite conventionally shot and less interesting, because it lacks that same eye. It's not George A. Romero operating the camera anymore. There were some great shots in this film. I was really struck rewatching it. It's been a while since I've watched this film, honestly. And just shots like the bloodied hand in the helicopter when they land to refuel their helicopter. And really, like, evocative and creepy. Because stuff like that, I think, used to just... I took it for granted because I was watching this film with 30 years of additional zombie movies that have done that kind of thing. But to think back, this was quite still one of the earliest zombie movies in this sense of flesh-eating, contagious zombie. So the idea of bloodied handprints was quite new imagery for a film like that, I think, still. I mean, you know, I'm not saying it's the first or it invented it, but...
Shall we move on to the, well, as Saul described, I suppose, Act 2 of the film, which is primarily set in this mall, which I think is the most famous aspect of the film. Like, you know, when you hear people talking about the plot, it's a bunch of people trapped in a mall with zombies.
Which is, I think, is a great concept. You know, it's a nice setup.
The shopping mall was quite a new concept in the 70s to the point that the characters don't all know what it is when they're looking at one in this film. Someone has to explain what a mall is in the film. And, you know, that's just because George A. Romero and co. went to a mall and were like, oh, we could do a zombie film set in one of these.
See, I did want to ask, like, what came first, whether that was the intent or whether it was just, oh, we've got this mall that we can shoot in. Let's make a film to do with that, and that's where this came about.
I think they had a sense of, we should do something to try and capitalise on Night of the Living Dead because we never made any money off it. And I think it was that combined with a sort of brainwave of inspiration from like, oh yeah, this mall thing's something we can do a film about. So this film is famously about consumerism. It's a critique of consumerism. And that is in there. There's obviously a sly little number of jokes about it, and the idea that the zombies are flocking to the mall because they retain a memory of it from when they were alive. Like, it is in there, but I don't know, is the film about consumerism? I don't buy it. I've never really bought it. I feel like it's a little peppering of...
I think it's like we're shooting in a shopping mall. It's like the home of consumerism. There's bound to be a few references to it. That's it, isn't it? That's about it.
Well, I mean, like I say, I think it was the driving force and the inspiration that led to the film being made, but I don't think it's the thesis of the film. I don't think it's what the film is about.
Yeah. I think you summed it up very well when you said it's a peppering, and I think it is something, and that kind of peppering for a film like this is enough to elevate it to a higher standing, I think. And maybe that's what people respond to. I don't know whether it was, we talked last time about Romero, was he just sort of like, you know, walking backwards into themes and comments and exploration, or was it intended? It feels a bit on the nose here, but then again, I don't know if that was just, if it's accidental or what. But
what is it saying about consumerism then, if it's saying something?
Well, it's very, like Cameron says, it's completely on the nose. We're all a bunch of zombies mindlessly consuming. That's the joke of it. That's the idea of it.
But are human survivors who do the same thing? They get into the shop and go, woo, let's go and have a shopping spree.
What I was about to say is I think this film is more about society and the structure of society in a whole, and, you know, the way that the most obvious thing being that, you know, humans are the real thing you've got to fear, and, you know, that old chestnut. It's not the zombies, it's the humans. And it's just about, you know, we dress up our lives with all these superficial luxuries, but at the end of the day, they're not important and all that. I think these are the ideas the film is grappling with properly. I think that's what it's about. It's about the structure of society, the fabric of society. And I think that making a little pop at mindless consumerism plays into that thematically, but I do think it's very much a side tangent within it. It's just a nice little, extra element. But anyway, so they get to the mall, they break in to get some supplies, they pretty quickly realise that they're onto a good thing here, and instead of their initial plan, which was to stock up on food and stuff and move on and keep going to Canada, they decide, maybe we should just clear out the zombies, fortify this place, and live here for a bit. Now, I think that's a great idea, Alan. So what's your problem with the character choices here?
That's a fine idea. Do you know what? I've been sitting here thinking, like, what was it that really annoyed me about this film? And I think there is a good film here. I think there's a good 40-minute film, and it's padded out. Not even with content that I'm not particularly interested. It's padded out with a fucking zombie wandering towards someone and them, like, not dealing with it in any competent way at all.
But they do. The four main characters survive for the vast majority of the runtime, and then one of them goes a bit delirious and careless, and they make a point of him getting silly and careless, and then he gets injured and ultimately dies. The other three characters survive until the humans break in at the end, and one of them gets shot by a human being. Yeah, and the other two survive.
Yeah, but he also he gets shot because he decides he needs to be a dick about it. Like, he could have just sat back
But that's with fighting other people. That's not about how he's handling the zombies. He's not making a stupid decision or...
It's still a stupid decision.
You're saying they handle the zombies in a stupid way, and that's not it.
For the most part.
He lets anger cloud his judgment with these people coming in. And...
Because what they do at the end is like, oh, I just smacked it in the face and it went away. Do that 5 minutes ago when it started attacking you. And for fuck's sake.
I don't think there are many bits where a zombie attacks them for 5 minutes. There's a bit where they get a kind of gag out of a zombie standing perfectly still alongside a load of mannequins, and then it lunges out and grabs one of them, which is an understandable mistake that person makes. He wrestles with it a bit and stabs it in the head with a screwdriver, which is a cool little special effect screwdriver that injects blood into your ear. Like, there's that.
But that's it. It's just this series of like, oh, and now a zombie's attacking me. I'm going to wrestle with it, stab it, chuck it.
There's the bit down in the basement when he's caught off guard because it's dark and he wasn't expecting it. And, you know, he's trying to do some other stuff. I can't think of many other bits where someone's particularly...
Well, that's a good example. He knows he's down there with another zombie. He's already fought it off once. Fucking shoot it in the head. Why are you messing about?
He's trying. He misses.
Like, put your back against the wall at least, for Christ's sake. Yeah, and then there's a Hare Krishna who just lumbers up the stairs, and this woman just sort of slowly walks backwards from him. She starts stacking boxes up against the door. Why don't you just carry on doing that? It must have taken about 20 minutes to get up those stairs.
Because it was knocking them over. She realizes they're obviously not heavy boxes, Alan. But you can see there's barely anything in them. The way she's moving them around, they're obviously pretty lightweight.
But the zombie lumbers at you. You kind of just shove it in the chest. It'll step back. It steps towards you. You shove it in the chest. It'll step back. You could just stay there forever, just pushing it away until someone comes and helps. They don't attack
they're
you.
Not presented, they're not presented as being that weak, Alan. They're presented as being strong, like, as a normal person. And, you know, your average man is physically stronger than your average woman. I hate to say it, but, like, that is biologically a thing. You know, it's quite believable that a Hare Krishna zombie would present a legitimate threat for a pregnant woman.
I think for anyone. I think, like, I really was sold on the idea that, you know, the zombies, I don't think they're super strong, but whatever it is that is driving them, they can use their entire body weight against something.
They're as strong as a human being, and they don't tire. And I think whenever the male characters, you know, are in similar positions and push a zombie away and run off, they're putting their full, you know, body weight into it. They're really pushing hard. They're not just, like, batting it away like a fly. It's, you know, this is something that does come up in zombie movies and things like The Walking Dead, but in this film, I don't think it's guilty of it particularly. I think that every time they deal with a zombie, you know, you do get a sense of, like, right, that's... maybe not an immediate massive threat, but it's certainly like, oh shit, this is gonna take my full attention for a few minutes and if 2 or 3 of them get me at once, then we're in trouble.
If I can agree with Alan on something, though, like, I don't mind the zombie attacks themselves. I do feel like from this point on, the film is a bit too long. And there is a bit too much of the characters running through the various things, and I lose track of what they're trying to do at some point, how they're trying to funnel them out. And then you have all of these extended scenes of them, you know, bringing in the lorries and trying to flush out the zombies and all that kind of stuff going around the thing. And I do feel like it is a bit too long.
Right, so... I watched the Argento cut yesterday in preparation for this for the first time. I kind of expected to, if anything, like it more because it shaves 20 minutes off. And yeah, Dawn of the Dead, I do think is pushing the limit of how long it can get away with being. The main difference with the Argento cut is it's all action. There's basically no characterization. The newsroom stuff at the start is like almost gone completely, straight into the SWAT team stuff. That goes on for ages. And so, you know, all the scenes where someone stands around watching a TV signal and there's nothing, it's just static, and someone says, why are you doing that? And he's like, look, it might come back on. They're all gone. In its place is just the action scenes.
I like those character bits.
it does not work nearly as well. I was really struck. If you ever want to see a masterclass in the difference a subtle bit of editing can make to a film, the Argento cut feels like the shitty Italian zombie movies of the 70s and 80s with no substance, a plot that's difficult to really care about. It's just a load of guys running around with a music bed playing over all the scenes. Goblin's score is used in both versions, but it's just, like I say, a music bed playing over the top of everything in the Argento cut. Barely any news clips on TV. It has no room to breathe. Having watched it, I welcome the extra running time in this film and the slower moments. I think they're actually really vital to the film working as well as it does. The film kind of washes over you without them and feels very dreamlike and ethereal.
I don't know if it's the slower moments that I'm reacting to. It is the action moment, what I think is supposed to be an action moment. Yeah.
The truck thing is a good example. They go out into the lorries and they drive a truck down the road and they park it right in front of the doors to stop the zombies sort of like pushing against the doors, whatever. And then he has to hop from one into the other and all that. It was a nice little, a nice idea. I like that they're doing that. It's giving them an impetus to do something. It needs to be done in half the time. And then the guy goes, well, just 3 more to go. And I thought if they show him doing 3 more of this and it's the exact same thing where he's like, oh, nearly got me. I'm going to that's setting up the fact that the next time he's sloppy, he gets caught.
Yeah.
But it was just too much, like, just let him get caught unawares or he gets cocky.
This is my favourite bit of the film, like this whole once Brad Bird has been bitten and then it's like he's going to turn into a zombie, but then they've kind of got them all to themselves and they are just, going around it, doing video games and all that kind of stuff. We have the scene where Brad Bird turns into a zombie and then Ken Foree kills him, and it's such a fantastic sequence, that whole thing where you know that it's coming and the sheet kind of comes off of him. Francine and the other guy are they're there, but they've sort of made this little apartment, or they're starting to form this little apartment thing, which is cool. And then there's the time jump as well, which I really like.
I love that they build a fake wall over a corridor in the mall to like hide themselves away. I think that's such a great element in this film. And obviously, it would have saved the day. They would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for bloody Flyboy retaining memories from his human life once he becomes a zombie. But anyway, so if anyone is listening to this who hasn't seen the film, which I think is quite unlikely, the characters build a fake wall over an entranceway to this kind of staff-only bit of the mall so they can live in it, safe from ever being found.
Yeah, that's not worried about the zombies. That's for when some humans come sniffing around, which, eventually does happen.
Yeah, because they anticipate there's a helicopter on the roof that's going to draw attention to this place. People are going to think that there's people in here. So they anticipate other people trying to come and get in on their sweet deal in the mall. And obviously
it's a lovely setup for like some kind of interesting conflict that could have taken place if someone else maybe had sort of written the film, or, because it is sort of like, what if it was just genuinely just, decent people like them who wanted to come in here and be safe and all that. But no, it's Tom Savini and a bunch of biker hillbilly psychos.
1 hour, 40 minutes into the film, we introduced this new antagonist.
Yeah.
Ugh.
What's wrong with that? They're the climax of the film.
Oh, it's much too late. They needed setting up earlier on. Time for third act escalation now. So here's this bunch of people who are just horrible and are going to take them all from them. There's no kind of interesting conflict going on. It is just, these are bad people and they're coming in here and we've got to stop them.
They're like cartoon motorcycle gang.
Yeah, I like that though. I've seen so many films where it is just another group of survivors and it's just like, they're people like us, are we going to let them in? And there's an annoying bickering rift. I mean, Night of the Living Dead does that. It's every zombie movie, and I like here that it is just a clear cut, it's just some complete and utter dickheads who, are going to cause trouble. And I think they're just solid in and out action. I think if they weren't two-dimensional villains, then the film would take longer to wrap up, and you don't need that at this point. introducing actual proper characters at this point in the film would be a mistake, but they're not. They're a force of nature that comes in to fuck everything up. And yeah, they come in, brute force their way into the mall. The Argento cut has a lot more of like the action, showing the actual logistics of them breaking their way in, which doesn't add anything to the film. And then we just get a load of them fucking about in the mall, which I love. I love that there's like a Mexican biker who keeps trying to get on the blood machine. Now, all right, Alan, I will give you that is a character who makes an inexplicable decision that makes no sense. I'll give you that.
He tries to test his blood pressure whilst zombies are eating him.
But he tries to do it like 3 times. He does it once at the start, and then a guy comes over and goes, "The fuck are you doing? there's zombies like all around." And he's like, "Oh yeah." And then when the shit hits the fan, he just goes back on it. And the zombies.
This was it. I was just. It really did feel like this was a different movie that had crashed into this one. Up until this point, I felt like I was following like real people, and like these bikers. It's quite a while. Like Francine is quite visibly pregnant. I don't buy that these bikers would have had this attitude for the last few months. I don't think they'd have survived this long. They're very cavalier about all this. And so I'm just like, this doesn't feel like a natural, this doesn't feel in keeping with the rest of the film. So it really did lose me in this third act.
But I think, it's not that the zombies overwhelm them. It's that these people fight back and they're not expecting it. And then the zombies overwhelm them in the chaos of people shooting back at them and hiding in the air vents. So I buy it. I think it's fine. They're expecting to go there and find, a few survivors and just take everything. I do think, obviously, there are some inexplicable moments of comedy, but those are throughout the film. To some extent, the blood test guy is bizarre, and I can't really justify it, but I love it. I'm happy it's there. They have a pie fight with the zombies. I like that. What else do they do that's silly? They're swinging around. At one point, one of them grabs onto the kind of decorative bunting, that's it, and swings down, and when they let go on the ground, they're holding a thick piece of rope. I like that. And I think Tom Savini, personally, I think he's fantastic here. I think he's just incredibly charismatic, chewing the scenery as this big mustachioed, machete-carrying biker. I think he's great screen presence.
I think he should have had a cock gun, and that would have really made it.
That would have made it, yeah. Again, the Argento cut here is very different. The Romero cut is going for a sense of fun and comedy, and absolutely there's the very iconic, I would say, sequence where the zombies all lumber around the mall, sort of in the aftermath of this, with the piece of music, the gonk, playing that. It's a bit of library music, sort of mall music. And you just get all these shots of the zombies over there. Again, I love that sequence so much. In the Argento cut, the whole biker thing is done without music and just the sound of like bike engines roaring, and whenever you see the characters, hiding from them, you just hear this kind of muffled biker noise. So it's trying to be a lot more serious and ominous, and I don't think it works nearly as well.
I don't know, maybe this just doesn't feel like the right place to have that kind of thing. Things pick up for me when, because, what's his name? Flyboy? Yeah. He gets caught by zombies and bikers in this whole thing, and he ends up being turned into a zombie. And in a quite a well-paced and really effective scene, I thought, that sort of leads the other zombies to this fake wall, and then they break through and they go up to Francine.
Francine and Peter have been waiting up all night in the hope that he's still alive, even though they know he's probably dead, so they can get to the helicopter and escape.
I liked the moment where Peter he realises the guy's not answering the radio, he must have been caught, so he's running back in, then he hears gunshots. He's like, oh, well, he's obviously still alive because he's firing a gun at him. And he's like, has this moment of hesitation, like, do I go back? Should I try and help him? No, and he doesn't, obviously. There's little moments like that, and especially with that character. I think that character is by far the best thing in it. In general, I liked the acting. I think the characters... I hated all the characters in terms of them as people, but I think the character elements that are there, if had been better handled, it's all there.
There's a lot of just subtle facial acting, you know? There's a lot of the film told with looks between one another, and it isn't all just exposition dialogue, which I think it would be very easy for a film like this to be. Can we talk about the music a bit? Because this film has a very iconic, certainly among horror film fans, score by the band Goblin, who are an Italian band. They are Dario Argento's doing their involvement here. They've done a lot of very famous, influential, largely Italian horror films. Suspiria is the other big one, apart from Dawn of the Dead. And I think they have a real distinct style and vibe. I love them, to be honest, as a band. I think they're great, and I love the music they've put together for this film for the most part. Jorge Romero's cut makes a lot of use of their music and a fair bit of use of library music, and it's kind of a mixed bag. I think I like most of what they do here, but there are a couple of moments, such as when Peter decides to not kill himself and you have this library music and it's just very like
I hated that.
The Argento cut is wall-to-wall Goblin, but like I say, it's like a music bed. It just kind of plays the entirety of these tracks over the top of scenes, and means you can't really follow any of the character and story level stuff going on, because it's just action with music over it. But I mean, look, I love the gonk bit of mall music that I was on about before. I think that's a great bit of music that they found, library music. I think it's got a really unintended, eerie undertone, that plinky plonky bit of music they play, and it's wonderful. There's a piece of music called La Cacchia, which is used a few times, or La Caccia, which is that kind of dun 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 dun. Which I think is great. That's used for a lot of the action scenes. It's just kind of upbeat and fun. And there's the main theme, which plays towards the start of the film in the Romero cut, and right at the start in the Argento cut, which is this very lumbering doom 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 doom, but then these little electronic bits come in, and it's so atmospheric and so creepy. And I think it's one of the best film theme tunes of all time, personally.
I did think it was very atmospheric for the most part. Yeah, and it didn't jump out at me as in, oh, I'm noticing it, which is what I like in a score, but it definitely worked.
I think it's in stark contrast to the music in Night of the Living Dead. It's such a different approach to putting music in the film.
Yeah.
But, yeah. They, anyway, they run upstairs, hop in the helicopter, and ride off into an unknown future. He says, how much fuel is there? She says, not a lot. And he goes, all right. I think that's a nice final moment.
Yeah.
Zombie movies are notoriously difficult things to end. Yes. Because you kind of either have everyone dies, or they kind of, the siege happens, they get overrun, and some of them run off into an unknown future. They're kind of your two options. That's why the Walking Dead comic book series was so revolutionary. It was like, well, what happens if we keep following these characters and keep seeing what happens, and there isn't that kind of annoying ending you get everywhere, because after the first few issues we've done it and moved on. Dawn of the Dead, I love it. I really, I've always kind of swung back and forth on which of George Romero's films is my favourite. It's changed a lot. And I have, I think, pretty firmly established that I think Night of the Living Dead is the best one now. But I also think Dawn of the Dead is just terrific, and it's very much its own beast, and I love it. As a film in this genre, I think it gives everything you could want from this sort of a film if you're into this sort of thing. So I give it a 10 out of 10, personally. I think
wow.
It's a phenomenal film.
Oh, I can't wait till you hear what I gave it.
I'll go next.
I already know I'm going to be furious, so whatever.
10 out of 10. This is a perfect film. That's what you're saying.
No, I'm not saying it's perfect. That's not what a 10 out of 10 is. What I'm saying is if you put every film in rank order in the world, this would be in the top 10th percentile.
That's not how my rankings work.
Well, it should be.
That's assuming that there is an exact spectrum of film quality.
Yeah, well, if you're taking issue with that, you're taking issue with the very notion of rating a film out of 10 in the first place.
Well,
you're not taking issue with my reasoning.
I'll go next. I really enjoyed this, actually. I think this is only the second time I've seen it, so I think I saw it with you at university, or maybe I watched it in my own horror marathon of the dead or whatever. And I remember not really clicking with it. I remember sort of being like, oh, well, whatever. This time, I really engaged with it this time, and I really enjoyed it for the most part. I have issues with the third act mostly, which is where most of my criticisms are, and I know that sloppy third acts are kind of part and parcel with the, I don't know if I would necessarily want them to turn on the TV and then it's like, haha, there's a cure, and then that's the ending. I know these things are very difficult to finish. But for the most part, I had a fantastic time with it. I really liked these four characters, and whilst I don't know if I find it very scary, there was some good creepy moments. There was a nice intensity. It's an 8 out of 10 from me.
Well, I hated it. I found it extremely infuriating. It was like there was lots of ingredients here that are good and that I liked, but they were constantly overshadowed or undercut. It's far too slow. It's 40 minutes too long.
Disagree.
Under kind of a less emotional bearing, I would probably give this, say, a 5. But it also, for whatever reason, just really hit my buttons. I was so angry watching this film. I was so annoyed. So I gave it a 3 out of 10.
What the fuck? That's just insanity. Alan, your taste is bizarre, because you've got really angry at this film, but you've given very little quantifiable reason or like points of things that really annoyed you. And yeah, you think it's the same as Diary of the Dead. I mean, fair enough, but that's insane.
Now you know how I feel.
Is this the most we've ever disagreed on something? On pure numbers?
Possibly.
Yeah, it probably is.
7 points between us. Yeah, probably. I don't think we'll.
I think we're both kind of going too far in opposite directions. Like, I know mine was obviously, like, I don't think it's really that bad, but in real filmic terms. But a 10 out of 10 is crazy.
Is it, though? This is one of the big classics of cinema. It's not that insane to give this film a 10, I don't think. It's
I think particularly for the genre, it's pretty iconic. It's
very well regarded. I mean, this film had 100% on Rotten Tomatoes for the longest while. I think it has come down since, but...
Cool!
I'm surprised that you would put this on par with Survival of the Dead, which is... or Diary of the Dead, which I are in a completely different league to me.
But this is the thing with Alan, is that he doesn't seem to be able to differentiate between things within a franchise, if you know what I mean. We ran into this with the Fast and the Furious, where he couldn't conceive of the notion that like the later ones are better than the first few, even if you don't like them, like myself. He was like, oh, it's all the same. Transformers, he couldn't see a difference between Transformers 2, the writer's strike one, and like the first one.
Well, it's just like, oh, look, there's some robots, they fight.
Yeah, but one of them actually had a script.
I don't know, you using the Transformers as if there's anything
because
there
the second one is so much worse than the rest of them. They're all crap, but
I don't know if I couldn't tell you anything that happens in any of them apart from a drunk Merlin.
I'd say all that stayed with me is that in one of them, Mark Wahlberg makes a really impassioned defense for statutory rape. Oh no, it's not Mark Wahlberg, is it? It's another character making the defense to Mark Wahlberg. He points out a legal loophole that allows him to sleep with an underage girl in that specific state.
Yeah.
Why is that in that film? That's so weird. Anyway.
It's very odd, isn't it? Yeah, but it's funny you should bring up Transformers because I think that's a good segue into the film that we're going to look at next, which I felt had some, reminded me of an era.
Can I ask a question of Sol? And I ask it with due trepidation. I'm not saying I want the full answer here, but can you give us a kind of history of the slow versus fast zombie situation?
Yeah, I mean, slow zombies were the first ones, obviously, although they took a while to really establish that they are slow when they were figuring out the rules. But it always seemed to be the kind of intent that they're slow or lumbering. There are fast zombies that predate the year 2000 or so. I think most people think that 28 Days Later and the Dawn of the Dead remake invented this concept. They did not. I think the most famous example of running zombies that predates this is Return of the Living Dead, the kind of semi-sequel to Night of the Living Dead made by John A. Russo's camp, but a franchise that kind of spun off from it, where the idea is that Night of the Living Dead was based on real events. When the characters encounter zombies, they try and follow the Romero rules, but those don't work. Killing the brain and the head doesn't stop them. They just keep coming. So those zombies run because they're just like people, but they're not like rabid sprinters. They're just like people who want to eat you, who can talk and everything. There is a film from, I think, the early 80s, possibly the late 70s. I think it was the early 80s, which is an Italian horror film, very trashy, called Nightmare City, which has running zombies that run around and attack, although they're kind of on the cusp between vampires and zombies. I think the director said he kind of thought of them more as vampires. They're infectious corpses who attack people, but they seem to like drinking blood rather than actually eating people, and they use weapons and stuff, and they run. But it is a real clear-cut concept. These things run. I think that was a very, new idea, really, in the noughties. And like I say, 28 Days Later was the first kind of definitive, these things are running as fast as they can, and they're really manic. Dawn of the Dead followed. The remake obviously followed, 2 years after 28 Days Later? 1 year?
Was it 2002? Yeah.
Yeah. So this Dawn of the Dead remake was 2 years after that. I don't know if they got the idea from that film or if they
In 28 Days Later, I know that they're like infected with a virus kind of thing, rather than being the actual kind of Walking Dead. That's right, isn't it? So that is a distinct change where we can go, okay, this is a different concept, albeit very similar, so they can run. We get it. The fact that they're dead and lumbering makes sense. These guys are still alive. It's more rabid. But with Dawn of the Dead, it's just, hey, they're fast and dead.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, it's just they're zombies, but they're not impaired in the kind of lumbering, ghoulish way. The dead come back to life, but they're really angry and have all their kind of motor function intact, it seems like, capable of making use of their bodies in a way that traditional zombies aren't. So yeah, Dawn of the Dead 2004, I think it's fair to say, was quite innovative, even though it wasn't the first film to do this. I'll give it that distinction.
I have a question for you, actually, Sol, just before we share thoughts on the film. Why this one? Like, why did they choose to remake this one? Was it just the mall setting that was appealing? Or, like, why this one and not, continue on the series with a different, without Romero? Or why not? Was Night of the Living Dead too overdone at this point?
I don't know if you have much scope to make a film with this kind of zombie where you just have a few people hide in a farmhouse because the zombies are probably going to break in immediately and the film will last 10 minutes. In fact, Barbara won't escape from the cemetery in the first place. The zombie will just get her there, probably. So I wonder if there's perhaps that aspect there, just more scope to explore. Dawn of the Dead's a classic in its own right. I think it is a famous, well-known film, on its own terms. It stands alone from Night of the Living Dead. I think some people had the rights to Dawn of the Dead and were like, how can we cash in on this? There's already Night of the Living Dead remakes out there, and there's no point making a kind of sequel because without George Romero's involvement, it's not really going to be a proper sequel, even if we say it is.
In terms of a remake, this is very much some people, survivors hole up in a mall during zombie apocalypse. That's the beginning and end of it, really, isn't it? It's a totally different kind of set characters and setup and stuff.
Yeah.
Which is okay. I think that's just, that's a great concept. Let's do it, but a bit of a new take on it, different characters.
The producers that made this film, I know they basically just wanted to do for Dawn of the Dead what John Carpenter did for The Thing and what David Cronenberg did for The Fly. I think the way they've spoken about it, they felt that this was a great film that people they love, but it is dated. Dawn of the Dead is very much a film from the 70s, and it, especially with special effects and makeup and so on, it's definitely not scary by modern standards. So I think they just saw the potential to do a legitimate, loving, modern update or fresh spin on things. And yeah, that's kind of what they did, to give them credit. This, for a good 10 years, I would say, displaced the original film in terms of the cultural zeitgeist. I feel like the original is starting to reclaim its spot now, but, for a while, I think if you said Dawn of the Dead, people were like, oh yeah, that Zack Snyder movie with the running zombies, and great.
Yeah, I remember it being more in the public consciousness at a time, and now I feel like that has faded somewhat. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we need to go into... Are we going to go into the plot as detailed as we did the 70s one? My thoughts are a bit more general, really, but I don't know.
I don't know if there is as much plot, to be honest. You've got this madcap 10-15 minute opening sequence, which is arguably the best part of the film, where
I would argue that
Sarah Polly, I can't remember what her character's called, she is a nurse. She wakes up one morning, the kid that she said hi to from next door is inexplicably in her house. I still don't like that zombie just finds its own way into the house without any kind of noise or anything. And then it's just a sort of adrenaline-fueled action scene where the daughter attacks her husband or boyfriend. He turns into a zombie, he attacks her, she gets escapes out the window, people smash through doors. She gets in a car, people are running around, it's chaos, there's a huge explosion, like massive fiery explosion after a car crash. And then pretty swiftly, she bumps into Ving Rhames and they bump into some more people and they go to the mall, which is just there, coincidentally.
And then there are more people there, and then more people arrive. There are so many people in this thing.
But all this happens and we get into the mall by minute 16. I kind of made a note. Because I thought it was really tight, but it tells us a story. The stuff with setting up her as a character was a bit on the nose for me. It's just like, oh, I'm an overworked nurse, but I'm a really good person. Look at me, I talk to children in the street and they like me. Aren't I great? It was just... I appreciate you just trying to set up some nonsense in a few minutes, but it was a bit kind of Americana for my taste. And then she goes out, she just bumps into Ving Rhames, the policeman. He's just the right place, right time. But that's okay. There's just sort of survivors wandering around. They kind of awkwardly decide to stick together. And then they just sort of go over the hill and there is a beautiful empty mall with no zombies in the car park whatsoever.
Yeah, very convenient, yeah.
A bit, like they could have at least had to sneak in or something, but okay. And then very quickly we established 3 more security guards in the mall.
I love that. I think if you're gonna add more characters in, add some fucking mall cops on a power trip. That's fantastic. We pitch our own ideas for sequels on this podcast. I would like to take the opportunity to pitch Paul Blart 3, Dawn of the Blart. It's just Paul Blart, but with zombies. I think that would work really nicely.
Yeah, okay, I can see that. Then we have these other characters, but I do feel still at this point, I feel like, okay, I know who these characters are, and I've got a sense of the dynamics. And, you know, it very quickly becomes this power play between this dickhead security guard. And I'm not saying the characters are really great and subtle, but they're there, they're solid, do I know what's going on?
I'd say they're on par with your standard George A. Romero script.
Well, I think this is what I'm getting at with why Dawn of the Dead earlier version wound me up so much, because it's like so close to being this very interesting character piece, whereas this is an action film with enough character to pull me through, and that's all I expect, that's all I need. Whereas with the other one, there's much more there to have, and it feels like it's so close. Whereas this, I know what I'm getting, and it worked for that level.
I've made a lot of notes. I've just found a piece of paper where I was scribbling notes about this film down. So I'm sort of crossing them out as we go.
Well, shall we deal with the Zack Snyder situation?
Okay. So we have spoken about... Yeah. We've covered on this podcast Batman v Superman very early on. Watchmen very recently. Is that it for Zack Snyder? I think we've probably made some disparaging comments here and there.
I liked Sucker Punch.
I liked Sucker Punch when I saw it back in 2011. I am hesitant to say that I still would like it if I watched it now. I need to revisit it. But
I saw it again in 2017, and I think I liked it again then.
But as a general rule of thumb, I don't think we're big fans of Zack Snyder on this podcast. I think I am
That's fair.
More a fan of him than you are, Alan, but even I think of him as quite a crap director.
Well, to be honest, I think I'm not a fan of the sort of films he makes. The fact that he makes them well or not is not that crucial. I want to say though, sort of up front here, that this film has a real visual style to it, and like on that level, I think it works. There's some really interesting moments. There's some moments that are really weird and are obviously him just getting a bit carried away. And I think obviously as he's got more freedom and more as he became successful, that has taken over a bit more.
Okay, well, this of course was his directorial debut. It's therefore arguably the most on a leash he's ever been as a director. This is generally speaking the film that people point to when they try and make the argument that he can direct films well. I'm not convinced. I think that this film is very stylish and has a great visual sense about what it's doing, but I think it is at the expense of making the film work in the way that I think it is intended. I think this film is something that should be utterly terrifying conceptually, and if not scary on the base level, there should be a sense of utter despair and hopelessness that permeates this film, because the situation they're in with these zombies, it is, you're fucked. You've got as long as you can keep a low profile in this mall, but it's a lost cause. None of that comes across. This film has no tension or horror about it, and I think that's because it's too stylish and otherworldly and music video like to ever connect on a human level or feel remotely real. It just feels like you're watching a video game. It's arguably not what Zack Snyder was trying to achieve, but I think he was trying to make a scary film. I think he approached this as, let's make a cool horror movie. What I will say is that the best part of the film, in my opinion, is the best part of every Zack Snyder film, and something he does remarkably well, which is the opening titles. I think the man cuts together an opening title sequence like no one else. The choice, in fact, the choice of music throughout this film is largely inspired. People give James Gunn, who's the writer of this film as it happens, all this credit for curating a great soundtrack for Guardians of the Galaxy, but it's just a playlist of good songs. This film has an inspired soundtrack. Johnny Cash singing The Man Comes Around over the opening titles, intercut with all this real-world news footage of protests and riots, intercut with newly filmed stuff with people being zombies on news cameras and so on. It is fantastic, and intercut with all the blood effects and so on. like we're looking at blood in a microscope. I think the opening titles are brilliant.
I think they're good.
Again, talking about the music, my favourite part of the film, not the opening titles, my favourite part of the film is the absolutely inspired use of Down with the Sickness as covered by Richard Cheese over a montage of them. Do you not like that, Alan?
It just feels a bit too much like a novelty. The whole soundtrack, it felt very much like, what kind of quirky song can I put on this scene?
Down with the Sickness is a very well-known song, but you can't normally make out the lyrics. You will. It's a song that goes bow wah wah. It's that one, and then the people go, "Get up, come on, get down with the sickness," and get all ridiculous.
That was really good.
Oh, get up, come on, get down with the sickness. You must not get up, come on, get down with the sickness. You fucker, get up, come on, get down with the sickness. Madness is the gift that has been given to me.
It's bordering on death metal, and the lyrics aren't particularly clever. But then Richard Cheese is a kind of comedy musician who does lounge covers of popular songs, and jokingly did a cover of Down with the Sickness where you can actually hear it. It gives it a really nice melody, I think, and all the lyrics fit so nicely, you know? I love that scene. I think it's inspired, but that's like the two bits that stand out to me are the needle drop moments. This film has a fucking weird colour palette, if we're still talking about Zack Snyder. It's like this weird, vibrant color grades they've done in the edit.
Well, I think that's kind of it is a product of its era. I remember at this point in the mid 2000s, you see it in the ex-Bond film Casino Royale and the Transformers films as well. I think it's because color correction was only just becoming a thing in Hollywood in like the last 5-6 years, something like that. And the ease with which it was you could do it digitally and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like at this time, the studios were kind of pushing what kind of they were pushing more in music video kind of direction, and maybe pushing it a bit too far, which is why you have these very strange, very grainy, high contrast, or is it low contrast? I don't know. There's lots of shadows, but the color's quite vibrant.
Yeah, it's the saturation on the colors is really pushed to the extreme, isn't it?
Especially in the interior scenes. Like when they get out in natural light, it's all right. But...
honestly, watching it felt like the settings on my TV were wrong.
Yeah.
I've made a note of a specific instance that I think kind of makes my point that the film has a unique style, but it's at the expense of the film really working like it should. There's a shot where our main character washes her hands quite early on after getting into the mall in the fountain.
Ah, yes.
And we just have a shot from under the water, so a submerged camera showing the blood washing off her hands. It's just...
because I'm immediately thinking, ooh, contaminated blood in the water, because then we have this really big close-up of Ving Rhames cutting his arm as he falls into the water, so I thought he was going to get infected, like cross-contamination somehow, but it just goes nowhere. There's a more egregious example when the woman who's like the trucker lady, she's going in to check on the guy with the baby, she smokes a cigarette, we have a long close-up on the cigarette being drawn, then she drops it on the floor, and there's just bizarre close-up of her stomping on the cigarette in slow motion. Just a bizarre choice. It's like, what? This isn't building tension. It's just a weird moment in the film.
Exactly.
It is a bit of a problem with Zack Snyder, and I think some other directors of his ilk, where a shot exists because it looks pretty, and we can put the camera here, and even though your brain tells you, because the shot might be so unusual or because they're sticking on it, that this is important plot information because that's how we're kind of hardwired, and it just isn't. And did Zack Snyder come from music videos? Because again, that feels like that's a music video thing where you just okay, then that makes complete sense because every shot is just a money shot.
Yeah. But that's what I mean. I think this is a good example of why he doesn't direct films well, because it's not in service of the story. It's everything exists in the there and now, and there's no sense of the bigger picture with it. But anyway, I think the film obviously has a lot of money behind it in the way the original didn't, and I think that, I mean, not a lot of money, but more than the original film. It's a product of Hollywood rather than a little independent thing, and I think that really does help it when it comes to huge seas of zombies and like just crowds below. Because they've got a lot more extras, even though I get the impression that perhaps they've done a bit of digital trickery to make it look like there's more than there are there. I'm not sure, but it does feel like a really nice, overwhelming amount of zombies on screen, which can be the thing that brings down a lot of zombie films.
Yeah, but because they're fast and aggressive zombies.
Yeah, you only need one for it to be a threat anyways.
Okay, so the first major thing that happens, I think, is this truck full of people turns up. They're shooting people, as obviously they're alive. There's a bit of dispute, well, should we help them or should we not? Yeah, obviously we should. And then they come in and we never really get much character development from them at all. There's a couple of them who, like, they're still there near the end. I'm like, who the fuck's that? Like, where did they come from? It perhaps just introduces too many characters. Like, if that was like 4 people in a truck, you could probably handle it, especially if one of them dies immediately. And they figure out that there's bites are killing people, turning people into zombies. It's not if you just die, which is, I believe, different to what we've established previously in these other films. But that's not what is that part of zombie lore? What's the sort of rules there?
George Romero zombie lore is anyone who dies comes back, and I think that's quite important to buy that such a thing could consume the world.
Yeah.
Lots of people die every day, and you'd very quickly become overwhelmed by that, because it would be the initial moments of panic that would allow the thing to really take hold, and it means you can't really get on top of it because it's always gonna, kill every zombie in the world, and tomorrow you'll have another several thousand fresh ones to deal with. But I don't think this was anything close to the first film to just make it a purely viral outbreak, like a transmitted in a bite and that's it thing. I mean, again, 28 Days Later, 2 years before, obviously did that. Resident Evil, obviously a few years before, did that. I can't think off the top of my head of how it works in all these hundreds of 1970s shitty Italian zombie movies, but I'm sure some of those make it quite clear that it's, a contagion. Return of the Living Dead even is, specifically the chemical that's made the zombies infectious rather than anyone. So yeah, it's not a new idea. It's
a quicker device. It's a quicker way of getting zombies if you think you've only got to be bitten by one and you don't have to actually full on die before you turn.
It's also a lot more believable, dare I say realistic, that it's specifically a contagious thing.
Virus sort of thing, yeah.
So I think that's just a product of modernizing and simplifying the concept. Tell you what though, it pissed me off that it's an hour into the film that the characters even figure out that the bite it spreads it. They don't even realize what's going on to that degree. There's a conversation an hour into the film where they sit around and go, oh, the bite, it's the bite that spreads it. And it's like, I know this is obviously a world where zombie movies don't exist, but what did you think was happening when that zombie girl who's had half her face bitten off walked into your bedroom that morning, bit your husband, and then he attacked you? I
don't know if it's an obvious connection. I don't know about that.
And on a similar note, actually, when that fat woman gets bitten, it's like they completely forget that zombies even exist, because the way they're talking about it, they're not even considering the idea that...
Yeah, I mean, you should look at her and go, oh, it looks like she's turned into one of them. Should we be worried about that?
I think you would think, hang on, why are these people attacking us and going all mindless? What's the... Well, they've all been physically attacked by each other. They've all got a wound on them, so they do seem to want to bite me if they get me. I don't know, I think you'd make that connection pretty quickly. Stuff like rabies presumably still exists in this world. And anyway, it really annoys me that there's it's like a dad and his daughter, and at one point there he's bitten or something, and they're talking about whether or not they can shoot him, and he says, you have to understand, she's lost everyone. It's like, yeah, so's every other person in this room right now. The entire world has collapsed. Everyone's seen their loved ones die. It's a safe assumption that all their friends and family are dead. What's your point, mate?
That's why they can relate to it, perhaps, when he's saying... Because, yeah, she's lost her rose, but they're basically saying to her, look, we're going to have to shoot this guy, your dad, now. Soz about that.
I do like that Ty Burrell is among those guys, though, that turn up partway through. I kind of wish they just got rid of those characters turning up in the middle and just had Ty Burrell be someone from the start. I like Ty Burrell.
Who's Ty Burrell? Which one's he?
He's the one who's in Muppets Most Wanted, and he plays like a French inspector trying to figure out who...
Oh, yeah. Oh, he's
in Modern Family.
He's the dickhead, isn't he? Yeah, he's that playing that character.
Yeah. Another stock George Romero zombie movie character.
There's a big bit where we see there's a pregnant character who has been bitten. So her boyfriend takes her off, husband, whatever he is, takes her off. There's a whole thing where he's keeping it secret. And
she's pregnant, she's bitten, and the whole way through you are just thinking, where are they going with this? Because it's going to be some mixture of poor taste and incredibly dumb, whatever you do with it. So why are we even going down this rabbit hole? And, I would say it comes out more on the side of being incredibly dumb than poor taste. But we do get a CGI zombie baby.
It's just unpleasantness, isn't it? Like, I think...
Yeah.
Just, it feels like icky and petulantly unpleasant for the sake of it, rather than like, I don't really need to see a pregnant lady die and then the zombie baby and all that kind of stuff. It's just needlessly...
I think there's a lot to be explored there about the guy. Like, this baby means so much to him, so even when it's a zombie, he can't like let go of it, you know. But again, we don't get a chance to explore any of that. He gets shot in the head.
That's not new territory for a zombie movie either. It's usually not a baby. It's normally like a little child who's being kept in the basement on a chain. But it's a well-worn trope. James Gunn wrote the script for this film, as I mentioned before, who has now become Hollywood royalty. He, directed the Guardians of the Galaxy movies and wrote them. That's probably what he's best known for now. But he started off as just a Hollywood kind of hired gun.
More hairy, hired gun.
Yeah. He did Scooby-Doo, Scooby-Doo 2 and Dawn of the Dead. They were kind of his big breakout, I'm a screenwriter kind of roles. Now, I do think he does a lot to make this film what it is. A lot of why it works is down to him. I think the most blatant example of what he brings to the project is the scene where they are up on the roof shooting celebrity lookalike zombies, having a game out of it. Yeah. I think that's such a nice injection of just personality into this film and a bit of fun. And that is pure James Gunn. Although, the zombie baby bit, that might well be James Gunn, to be fair, and I hate that, so whatever.
Yeah.
The most annoying bit for me was when this stupid young woman goes into the zombies after the dog, which, when the dog is in no fucking danger, that's the most annoying thing, and everyone knows it. That's the whole point of sending the dog.
Talk about adding in a random character too late into the film. They go down into the basement in like the last third, and there's a dog down there, and then a zombie with no legs like climbs across a pipe and attacks someone, which is so profoundly stupid. I think it's arguably more dumb than the baby stuff. If they were trying to make some point, like, oh, there's no zombies walking around, we've done a sweep, but this thing's climbing and we didn't see it. But it just doesn't work at all. Anyway, then they realise there's a guy in a building across the way that they strike up a relationship with, which I think is a lovely part of the film.
Yeah, I feel like it should have gone somewhere else, though. I didn't like the way that came to an end.
They communicate with whiteboards, writing messages back and forth, and then they send the dog over with some food and supplies for him, and when he opens the hatch for the dog to get in, the zombies follow. It's a very, very badly thought through plan.
Yeah, it felt like there should have been more to it than that, because it felt a bit too obvious. Like, why would you do that? It's too dangerous.
This is before the bit you're talking about where the woman who loves the dog chases her, goes on a suicide mission to retrieve the dog, who's obviously fine. And then there's a really annoying bit where they're like, oh, he's all right, he's on the roof, he's writing something, and then the zombie lifts up the sign with blood all over it.
Oh, I wanted it to say brains in big letters. I was really hoping for it.
It's just these zombies are so like animalistic. They've shown no indication of the Romero-esque retained memory thing in the film whatsoever, apart from, I guess, being drawn to them all. It's just such a dumb moment.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, they devise a plan
Well, they've
to
already
build an A-Team style tank and escape.
They've already done that by that point, but then they're not ready to set off yet. But they have to go and rescue this stupid woman.
Well, the dog is sent over to try and get this guy ready so they can rescue him, isn't it? And it all goes wrong. But yeah, they pimp up A-Team style, full-on A-Team montage of them doing, what is it, a school bus or something, and turning it into like a tank. And then we just have a really, it's just overbearing action scene where they try and get out and they're chopping zombies up with chainsaws through the gaps in the thing. They're lighting up propane tanks and throwing it into the crowd and shooting them, and then the things are exploding with explosions as big as when the petrol station exploded at the start of the film. It's ludicrous, and it's that whole thing of less is more. There's too much going on to take it all in, and therefore it just ceases to register as any sort of a threat story. And anyway, then they make their way to the pier where this guy has a boat.
I know they set off a bit kind of ad hoc because they accidentally let the zombies in, but they don't even take any food with them on this mission. They just take a bunch of guns.
Yeah.
It's what is this plan exactly? It's well thought out at all.
Get to the guy's boat on the dock and ride off into the ocean. That's the whole plan. And they pretty much manage it. They crash the thing at the end, so the guy using a chainsaw accidentally chops the woman up inside.
Oh, that's ridiculous. That was
bizarrely unpleasant moment that just doesn't need to exist.
But fortunately, we hadn't seen anything of that woman. Like, we didn't know who the fuck she was anyway. So.
That's just it. It's like these two relatively pointless characters have this moment, and it's like, God, just cut them out of the script. You just don't need if their sole purpose is to sort of accidentally kill. He accidentally kills her. Then that's a really terrible excuse for having a character in a thing. Anyway.
And Ty Burrell gets turned into a zombie, but they grab his keys before it happens, his keys to the boat. So a few of them manage to get to the boat and they ride off, and that's the end of the film. And so then we just get a pointless bit of footage cut in over the end credits, and they make their way to an island, and the island's full of zombies, and then they presumably die. And that's the end of the film, and it's completely pointless. And I mean, it is open-ended to the point that if they really wanted to, they could have made a sequel picking up with them, and they didn't die on that island.
But them getting to the boat at the end and floating off into the that's your open ending. That's your helicopter off the mall ending.
Yeah, the whole film just. I think there's a mean spirit to this film that I'm not a huge fan of, and I think that's more Zack Snyder than anything, because you see it in a lot of his films. I think George Romero himself summed it up pretty perfectly when asked his thoughts on the film, which he said the first 15 or 20 minutes were terrific, but it sort of lost its reason for being. And I think that's pretty much this film in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's exactly my review, actually. I hadn't seen this. Are we doing wrap-ups, or?
Yeah, I mean, I've got one more note if you want it, which is they should have killed a zombie and then it falls into a tank full of those fish that eat the dead skin off your feet, and all the fish swarm the zombie and eat it down, and it becomes a skeleton. That's something I wrote down because I got bored while I was watching the film.
Yeah, but that's just it. Like, I think I've only seen this film once before, and it was probably not too long after it came out, maybe 2007, 2008, something like that. And I have really strong memories of the opening, 10, 15 minutes.
I don't know if you remember, Calvin, but I remember back in 2004, they aired the opening 10 minutes or something on Channel 4, when the film came out in cinemas to promote it. The idea being everyone would watch it and go, oh my God, what an amazing looking film. We've got to rush to the cinema and see the rest of it. So it was like everything up until they get to the mall, I think.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing it because I was sort of like, oh God, it's like this terrifying 18 rated zombie movie, and I'm 14 and terrified of zombies, and so I remember seeing those opening minutes and thinking, yeah, cool, and then finally watching the film probably a year or two later on DVD, and it doesn't live up to it, does it?
No, but I stand by those opening 15 minutes or however long it is. I think it is fantastic, really well done as a shot of adrenaline. Anyway,
yeah. I mean, we've done Resident Evil on this podcast before, and you made the argument that, look, not everything is high art. Some stuff is like McDonald's, just comfort food, junk food. And, you know, I got annoyed because I was saying, well, that's not what Resident Evil is. Resident Evil is bullshit. And I would say Dawn of the Dead remake is your junk food, kind of trashy, easy to enjoy kind of take on this subject matter.
I don't know. I'd rather watch any of the Resident Evil films over this. And that's not to say that I think it's badly done here. I think for what it is, it's fine. A great opening 15 minutes, and then it just kind of meanders, and I get bored, and there's too many people. So I'm going to give it... Oh, I'm stuck between a 5 and a 6. I can't quite... 5. Yeah, 5. It's not that. Yeah. No, 5.
I'll go next because I think, rather echoing, I thought it was fine for what it was. I think that's quite a nice way of summing it up. There's some really nice things in there. It's sort of let down by some just sort of things that could so easily have been better. Chop some characters out. You know, it's just like a little bit of trimming and you could make this really nicely. I think, you know, having Zack Snyder's visual thing going on in 2004 is kind of fresh and engaging, even if, you know, yeah, like you say, the bigger picture doesn't quite work. But it kept my attention. It's very pacey. I enjoyed watching it for what it is. 6 out of 10.
Obviously, I have a very low threshold for what constitutes solid zombie entertainment. I give it a very generous, I think, 7 out of 10. Really more of a 6.5 rounded up, but, you know, I think it does what it does quite well. But
so where does that leave us in the world of zombies?
Yeah, what are we looking at next?
Well, yeah, of course, the third and for a long while final entry in the series was Day of the Dead, which came another nearly 10 years on after this. So that's what we'll be looking at next week, along with Land of the Dead, the kind of additional latter-day sequel, and some of their remakes, because all of these films get remade and cashed in on. Come back for that. And did you know there was a sequel for this film in development for ages called Army of the Dead, which has sprung back into life and is now being made by Zack Snyder, who never originally intended to direct it, but I get the impression that it's been made as a kind of standalone film now rather than a sequel to this, which is what it once was. That's going to be out on Netflix next year, I think. Pandemic permitting.
Interesting.
Next week, Day of the Dead. Happy Halloween.
Yes.
Till next time.
Yet.
No, not quite.